Look, this really is extraordinary. Below this Cambridgeshire field are the remains of the world's first prisoner of war camp. Built 200 years ago, this vast military complex incarcerated 7,000 captured soldiers and sailors from Napoleon's French forces. And yet, in spite of countless reports and records from the time, no one really knows what this groundbreaking prison looked like. What's more, almost 2,000 foreign prisoners are buried here, but their final resting place has also been lost to history. So, can we not only find the hidden story of Norman Cross POW camp, but also the site of nearly 2,000 missing war graves? The remains of Norman Cross camp are in rural Cambridgeshire, just off the Great North Road, or in modern parlance, the A1. It's a massive site, with earthworks covering almost 22 acres. And yet the crucial role it played in military history is almost forgotten, except by a keen and active local society, who have re-erected this 100-year-old monument to the Napoleonic prisoners who died here. Ben, you've been banging on to us about this site for, it must be at least 5 years, because you're not only one of our archaeologists, but you're also a friend of Norman Cross, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. I've been involved with the site for a number of years.
What is it that really fascinates you about Norman Cross?
It's fantastic. I mean, it was an experiment. It's a unique site. It was a response to an enormous problem. What to do with all these troops? How do we keep them humanely? How do we take them off the battlefield, but keep them in an enlightened and humane way?
But surely if it was an experiment, if it was created, what, by the army?
Well, strangely enough, it was the Navy.
Really?
We're miles inland, I know, this is absurd, but it was actually the Navy that was responsible for all enemy captives in this country.
But surely they must have kept records. Is there anything that we can learn?
There's plenty of records. But the interesting thing is they tend to contradict one another, as do the contemporary accounts. Everyone has something slightly different to say about this site. But the fact of the matter is, no one's excavated here. This is an enormously important site in terms of world history, and no one's excavated here.
Well, it may never have been dug by humans, but the rabbits have been turning things up for ages.
At a guess, I'd say it's French.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. As it says Republique Française on it, that would be a clue. It's a beautiful uniform button.
It is the right period.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's revolutionary France. There it is.
It's always a relief to know we're in the right field. Originally called the Norman Cross Depot, the camp was built in 1797 after a number of British victories over the French. It was closed in 1814, when Napoleon first went into exile. And there are plenty of contemporary maps, plans and illustrations of what the camp looked like. But they all seem to show something different. So Geophys's main task will be to establish its true layout.
So, have we agreed what we're doing?
I think so, Phil.
But while we're waiting for John's first results, we do have a big, obvious, lumpy, bumpy thing to put a trench across. And I don't mean our dig director, Francis.
I think the main thing is we've got to understand these outer defences. They're what kept the prisoners in. OK, so we're standing on the top of one of them, and then on the inside here, you've got 4 of the barrack blocks. So I'd quite like to put a trench across the defences and then ultimately going over towards the barrack block.
So Trench 1 goes in over the western banks and ditches to look at how the British planned to contain the mass of prisoners.
See, look at that. That's well sorted, isn't it? There's no stone in that. That ain't been ploughed in donkey's years, I don't think.
What did we do with our prisoners of war before we started building places like this? Did we just slaughter them?
No, we didn't do that. What we did was use disused warships. We put them in harbour and we put them on there. We could control them, but disease broke out. They died in hordes on board these things, so we needed something that was better.
So how do you start building a camp like this?
Well, I think you've got to look at what was standard at the time for a fort and then sort of turn it round. So what we've done here is we've come up with a graphic that shows the layout of an artillery fort. And when you look at it, what you've actually got is a series of ditches around the outside, a defensive wall. They're going to have cannons that point outwards, and on the inside they're going to have barracks for the garrison. But if you want to turn it into something that you can make into a prison, it works like this. What you now do is turn it all round. The ditch goes on the inside, the wall's still in the same place. What you now do is put the garrison on the outside as prison guards. You take your guns and you fire them along the wall if you need to, in case the garrison need to deal with an escape. Blockhouse right in the middle, so you can keep an eye on everything that's happening on the interior. And obviously on the interior, you've got your prisoners, so that's where you put your huts for your prisoners.
Norman Cross is so important, it's a scheduled ancient monument, and there's no way we could dig this entire site in just 3 days. So we're going to concentrate our geophys on one quadrant, working out the location of the accommodation, latrines, punishment blocks and so forth. And that should help us to draw up an accurate plan for the whole site. All we need to do now is find some archaeology.
Oh, I don't know, what the hell's that then?
Pass.
This used to be the stables of the camp. As you can see, it's now an art gallery, although we've turned it into a beautifully appointed incident room where we have our beautifully appointed historian, Bethany.
Hi.
Bethany, what was going on between France and England when this camp was being built?
I think what you've got to remember is that this is a time when France and England are mortal enemies. I mean, they hate one another. There's a young Frenchman at this time who says that men should suck hatred of the English name with their mother's milk. I mean, there was a fair bit of antipathy. You've had brutal and traumatic French Revolution in 1789, and now you've got this massive rank of Napoleonic forces poised to invade Britain.
So would the French have been nervous about how we might have treated their prisoners?
The French were very nervous. All kinds of stories went around now in the press that the English tortured their prisoners. But of course, the Brits were actually outraged about this because this is the end of the Enlightenment and they think that they're dealing with prisoners very well. I mean, when they planned this Norman Cross, it's a kind of model prison. It's a show prison. It's the prison of the future, if you like.
But why build it here? We're miles away from the nearest port.
On purpose, because the last thing that they want is some kind of prison breakout, and then you get angry Napoleonic prisoners joining up with Napoleonic fleets, and you've got a kind of pincer movement. You know, you don't want to kind of create your own invasion force, so on purpose, they put it bang in the middle of nowhere. Of course, this causes some problems for the locals. So for the good people of Huntingdonshire, it's like having Abu Ghraib kind of set up near Bedford.
Ben!
But given that this was a military prison, our first discovery on site is a surprisingly delicate find.
Oh man, jeez, that is incredible. Oh, that is just fantastic.
And if that's the sort of reaction we get for a mysterious piece of engraved bone,
We haven't ever come across sort of half-complete pieces or the offcuts.
what on earth's going to happen when they find the actual prison?
Can I let me have a hold of it. Oh, that is fantastic.
You're pretty chuffed about this,
I am very chuffed about it.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
It's lunchtime on day one in Cambridgeshire, and our dig on a Napoleonic POW camp has so far turned up what? Swords? Manacles? The key to the front gate? No, just a lot of mysterious pieces of cut and carved bone.
Cut along there, and it's cut along there, and it's cut there, and To be quite honest, I've never seen anything like that in 40 years of digging.
That is weird, isn't it?
I don't know what it is.
These precision cuts of bone have got the archaeologists all of a flutter, as they're not the sort of thing you'd normally associate with a prison. And I'm now keen to see that prison, even if I find this dig's target a tad unsettling. It is weird digging a concentration camp.
It's not a concentration camp. This is not a concentration camp.
What is it then?
This is a humane response to dealing with all these captives. I mean, we had people coming from the West Indies, from the Peninsular Wars, from Holland, from the Low Countries. This site was deliberately chosen because it was healthy, well supplied with food from the local area. They took a lot of care in keeping these troops in relative comfort.
200 years ago, the concept of a prisoner of war camp was a radical one. So one of our main aims is to establish the layout of Norman Cross. And Geophiz may just have found our first target inside the compound.
This is the line of the defences, coming round and turning. And as we go inside into this area here, we're getting a mass of anomalies. And these are actually the outlines, I think, of the building blocks where the prisoners were kept.
And had 500 men in each one. I mean, that's extraordinary.
So Trench 2 goes in to prove whether or not this blob is an accommodation block.
It looks like from a little toy or something. It's really intricate, isn't it?
Norman Cross heralded a new theory in the etiquette of war, a sort of gentlemanly way of treating the enemy. But in spite of the pioneering efforts made, prisoners did still die here in their hundreds, as a result of illness, malnutrition or disease. Almost 2,000 Napoleonic prisoners are buried somewhere in these fields, but the exact site of those war graves has been lost. Until now, as Stuart and Helen have made it their task to rediscover the lost burial ground of Norman Cross.
We've got the records of somewhere like 1,700, mainly French prisoners of war, and they've died. Some of it is everyday deaths, but a lot of it is an epidemic in about 1800, but we don't know what that disease was. There's so many people that died that the government had to buy a large field to act as a burying ground, and I suppose it would have been logical to try to get the dead bodies as far away from the prison as you could.
Except that we don't know where. How on earth can you lose a cemetery containing all those bodies?
I don't know. At the moment, it is a real mystery.
How are we going to do this, Stuart?
We've got lots of evidence. We've got lots of historic maps and plans which shows the layout of the camp and around here. We've got the landscape. There's all sorts of clues we can look for that might narrow down the search for where this cemetery might be located.
Brave words, but it's a tougher challenge than it sounds, and unfortunately we can't use the fantastic Eagle monument as a reliable marker for the burials. It was originally erected on the other side of the A1, and 100 years after the camp closed down.
I think they mean cemetery.
And then there's another problem. Talking to the local Friends of Norman Cross, we've now found out there were actually 3 cemeteries here.
So did your parents think that this was a graveyard round there?
There was talk that that was a graveyard.
The massive prisoners' cemetery, another one described as a small French graveyard, and finally one for the English Guards. And it turns out we don't have an accurate location for any of them.
A French priest would come and carry out a mass for these graves.
No.
And where did he do that mass?
He was actually doing it here, in this spinney, which you just identified.
So he may have been doing it in the wrong place by the sound of it.
The only way we can really work out what's going on here is to find the location of all 3 cemeteries.
OK, I've got it there.
OK,
right, off you go.
So, armed with little more than a historical description of the English burial ground, a tape measure and blind optimism, Stuart and Helen set out to tick at least one cemetery off their list.
OK.
Ooh, look at that.
Oh, look. Oh, it's got something on.
Well,
Back on site, there's now no doubt that we're in the right place.
There was a shortage of money at the period, of currency. I wonder if it's some sort of local tradesman's counter.
The big structures may still be eluding us, but the sheer number of small finds testifies to the scale of humanity that was once on this site.
Hey, another domino.
Well, that's great. Oh, look, it's a blank 3. We've had loads of that, so 5 or 6 now.
And intriguingly, an awful lot of it seems to be made of bone. Earlier on, Francis got really excited by this piece of bone. Can you see this massive cut on it here and this butchery mark here? He said he'd never seen anything like it. And then, Ben, you found another little sliver of bone and you got even more excited.
Yeah, Phil's discovery. Look at that. Lovely little ring and dot design on there. And then, even more exciting, these little wheels.
Why are they doing this?
I'll show you.
Oh, wow, that is so beautiful. This was made here?
Yes, right here at Norman Cross, and is now part of the collection at Peterborough Museum.
By a prisoner?
Yes. And you can see, look, the wheel.
Oh, the wheel is, yeah, definitely very similar
Yeah.
to our wheel.
And then the ring and dot design will look familiar.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. And even better, about 5 minutes ago, this little fella turned up. Look at that.
So they were playing dominoes. These beautiful pieces of crafted bone were a trademark of the prisoners. Carved with enormous skill and dedication, it's the last thing I'd have expected to find in a prison. This craftsmanship was also appreciated by the local population surrounding the camp. And thanks to a thriving market, some of the carvers left Norman Cross as very rich men.
And if you scale that measurement, which is 44.8 metres that way...
Over on the other side of the site, Stuart's now convinced he's found the small cemetery for the English Guards. It's in a little overgrown copse to the east of the camp, but there's a problem.
Until this morning, the Church of England didn't know that this place existed, and it is still consecrated ground.
Oh, no.
So we need Church of England permission in order to be able to excavate here, as well as our burial licence.
No.
So if we'd have had about 3 weeks and we'd known in advance, then we might have been able to do something, but not today, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Not being able to dig this mini forest is probably a blessing in disguise, as Phil and Francis still need all the available manpower on site to work out what, if any, structural remains are still here.
So this line of stones here is probably going to be, I think it must be something related to the camp.
But having established the English cemetery, Stuart's now keen to get stuck into the 2 missing French burial grounds, starting with an area to the northeast of the camp.
The evidence we've got so far, John, is this is a plan of the camp, and we've got this one reference shown on this plan which describes this as the French churchyard. So that implies French cemetery. That we know there's a cemetery, a small cemetery somewhere here.
So a trench goes in over what Stuart believes to be the small French cemetery. And if right, it'll be the first time anyone has established its exact location. But it's now the end of day 1, which means it's time for a swift visit to the staff canteen. It's such a weird site, this. We've found all these beautifully crafted small finds, and yet now we're going, oh, we don't want any more small finds because they're getting in the way of us discovering any structures.
But we are beginning to find bricks, so we are beginning to find evidence of those structures.
Which is good news, as we may need to free up some manpower to dig the final missing cemetery. And Jackie, Helen and the Friends of Norman Cross are now trying to find its likely location.
We're quite close.
Walker says they came out of the west gate and through that long drive, and then it's a few hundred yards to the right.
Yeah.
The only problem is they're putting a lot of faith in the original site of the Eagle Monument. But that was positioned on evidence from 2 local histories, both written 100 years after the event.
We don't know how much to trust any of these pieces of information. They don't support each other because they're all from the same source.
I think this may turn out to be more difficult than we first thought. So are we going to locate the massive Napoleonic cemetery complete with its 1,700 bodies? We'll find out tomorrow.
Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world with more digs and greater access than ever before.
It's day 2 in our investigation into a Napoleonic prisoner of war camp in Cambridgeshire.
That is cut-like, isn't it?
And the big news is that we may just have found the first of our 2 French cemeteries.
We've got this cut here, which is looking horribly grave-like in shape and size.
Show me where you think the cut is.
Well, we've got, you can see this nice sort of brown stuff here, which we've got all the way down the length of the trench almost. But then we've got this chalky material here, it's chalky pebbles. So the change, can you see that line?
Yeah.
Running down there? So that's one side.
And then you've got it the other side coming down here, and a nice turn at the top there.
And the point is, this is the sort of bits of natural that you'd find deeper down. So it does look as though someone's been digging in and then putting the natural back on top.
And we may expect to find graves here, because earlier on, just on the edge down there, I did find some human bone.
This is a fantastic discovery, as we suspect this area is the site of a small French cemetery, just one of 3 lost burial grounds linked to the Norman Cross POW camp. We've already located another one, a small graveyard for English guards.
Somewhere further out here to the west of the A1.
And Stuart's now feeling confident he can find the last resting place of 1,700 prisoners.
With one reference to the burials being in a low part of the field.
Behind you can see this blue, that's the lowest area in that area.
Right.
It's considerably lower than where we're working at the moment.
But if we're to test Stuart's theories, we're going to need personnel.
It's like watching a great dancer, isn't it, watching me shovel?
A what?
A great dancer. You move from the hip.
I reckon I can shovel, but I'm damned if I can dance.
Unfortunately, I'm not sure there's a major sense of urgency amongst the diggers on the main site of the camp.
I'll tell you one thing, though. For an old boy, you need quite a nice flat bottom. I can't stand it.
There ain't nothing like a flat bottom, Francis.
I think they're talking about the bottom of the trench. Or maybe they're not. We've now got 3 trenches over the camp in a bid to refine its layout. There's one over an accommodation block and a new trench over what Francis suspects to be a latrine block.
Hi, Ragshaw. Any sign of a latrine? I can't smell anything.
No, I can't smell anything either with my honed nostrils.
And then there's the massive trench Phil's been digging over the outer defences of the camp.
This is the first line of defences of the main camp, the outer bank.
And they're turning out to be quite stupendous. Hardly surprising, really, as they would have had to be strengthened after a mass breakout by 500 prisoners in 1807.
All the literature led us to believe that at the top of this bank, about here, we'd find this great big wall that they built, but I'm blowed if I can see.
I think it may actually be down in here, in the main ditch.
This was a formidable combination of high banks, walls, and a silent walkway where soldiers patrolled an interior ditch so low that it would have prevented prisoners tunnelling out. But although these enemy troops were now safely removed from the battlefield, there was another war to be waged, and that was against chronic boredom.
These are very, very long days they've got to get through. And the absolute obsession in this camp, it turns out, was gambling.
That would explain the 6 domino that we found, wouldn't it?
Yeah, dominoes, there are counters, but it's not just from the archaeology that we know about this. They're gambling so much that it actually causes a bit of a kind of international incident at one point, because there's a group of prisoners who are so determined to win, that they end up gambling away all their clothes. So they haven't got anything. I mean, they're naked, they haven't got a stitch to wear, and they're called les miserables. But the French think that it's our fault, so the French write us these really angry letters saying, we hear that you're treating our prisoners appallingly badly, they don't even have clothes to stand up in. And the Brits write back and say, actually, it's their fault, they're gambling them away.
So there'd be a lot of people in this camp who wouldn't even have had a single penny.
No, no money at all. However, they are ingenious, this lot. And one of the things that they start to do here, around about 1804, is to forge banknotes.
Oh, you're joking. So we've got gambling to the point of nakedness, and now we've got forgery.
It sounds a bit more fun now, doesn't it?
No! It's beginning to sound as if Norman Cross wasn't quite such a humane and gentlemanly place after all. And out on site, Francis's next target is the place where the bad boys were locked away. This is where we think the black holes were, the punishment blocks. And as you can see, the rabbits have made quite a mess around here. But what they have done is that they've exposed this brickwork. This is the most solid piece of structure we've had so far on the site. Tracy, when you're digging something like this, does it help to know what it looked like, or do you just dig and see what's there?
I think for this sort of thing, it actually helps not to know. I think it's good you go in with a completely blank canvas, so it's that sort of surprise, but you're also not letting the history lead you. You're letting the archaeology talk for itself.
Have we nailed down the walls?
I think we pretty much have.
And as one trench opens, another closes, because Matt has now established that John's geophys does indeed show the position of the accommodation blocks.
We go to this end of the trench, we had the kind of gravelly yard surface at that end, and then here we've got a dip with the stones in it and some more clay there. I think we've got the wall line across there.
Yeah.
Inside the building, we've got this compacted pale grey floor, and that goes all the way up to where Chris is there, where we've got another wall line, same as that, so I'm pretty sure, bang, bang, there it is.
There it is. Beautiful.
But we've also found evidence of how the British Navy managed to squeeze up to 500 prisoners into each block.
That looks like a sucking great post.
Yeah, and I think that may be one of these posts that supported the hammocks. Andy was talking here earlier about they'd have rows of hammocks going down the barracks there.
Yeah.
They weren't attached to the walls, they were on these supporting posts. So I think we might have got lucky and just got one of the post holes there.
Fantastic.
Using hammocks was the classic Navy solution to packing men into a tight space. But the result was cramped, fetid, and basically just very unpleasant.
So they've got, what, about 8 foot of space per man, but 3 hammocks, one above the other?
Yeah, and it works out to being 2 feet in width, so they're really crammed in. Just nowhere for anyone to go.
And talking about nowhere to go, there would have to be in each compartment, as it were, a tub for urine and other bodily fluids at night if you need to go to the loo, because you couldn't just pop out and go to the latrine. And they would need to be emptied, taking those tubs down the stairs. Combine that with 500 sweaty blokes, and that's going to be pretty grim in there.
So perseverance has paid off then. It looked like a grave cut from the top, didn't it?
Yeah,
And then, now here's the proof.
Yeah, it's going from the hip region. That's the hip. So that's the top of that's the ball joint of the femur, the thigh bone.
With so many people stuck close together, it's no wonder that so many prisoners died. And back on site, we've got confirmation that we found the location of the so-called small French cemetery.
And now this confirms that it is, in fact, a north-south burial.
It does, yes.
I mean, what are the implications of that?
Well, we'd expect a Christian grave to be going east-west, but some of the French that were imprisoned here were from the Protestant areas of France. They weren't all from Catholic areas, and non-conformists could non-conform in a variety of ways, one of which would be that they would bury their dead on a different alignment.
According to the later histories, this small cemetery close to the prison's hospital should contain maybe 20 or 30 burials. And to confirm this, geophys are now surveying into the next field to check just how far this burial ground stretches. And would you believe it, Helen and Stuart think they may also have found the location of the massive missing third cemetery.
You need to turn right and go along there.
So you want me to drive into the field?
Yeah.
So when the farmer wants compensation, he wants to come and see you, yeah?
No, you're driving. The driver takes
I'm
responsibility.
just doing as I was told.
Now, boys.
Unfortunately for us, it's on the other side of the A1. And we may have to put in a rather long trench to confirm their hunch.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
60 metres that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You hold that end.
It's going to take a lot of effort to convince Francis to give up half his team to move to a field some quarter of a mile from our main site. Especially as we've just discovered a small find in the new latrine trench.
I think that's cess, don't you?
It's clearly in the right place, isn't it, for cessy material? I mean, this is where the privy should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this time, it's not a coin or a button. It's the sort of small find you'd expect at the bottom of a toilet.
These privies were actually tall enough to get some kind of cart or vehicle underneath, believe it or not, so they could clean away all the waste.
So this cess would be what's left on the bottom, as it were.
Could,
so to speak.
So to speak, yes. Could be. You can have it back, actually,
Oh,
Francis.
thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thanks very much for that.
Lovely. So, by late afternoon on day 2, we can use the trenches and geophys to give positions for the accommodation blocks and latrines. Slowly but surely, we're beginning to build up a picture of the camp's layout. And thanks to the historical documents, we're also getting an insight into just how grim day-to-day life actually was in this supposedly innovative new prison. What happened to you when you were incarcerated in a black hole?
It must have been absolutely horrible. There's no natural light at all. It's very, very cold. In the documents, you get a lot of evidence of people who died because they've caught pneumonia and they've got kind of catarrhal infections having been in there. But then added to that, you've got this problem that your rations are cut, that you're only allowed half your allowance.
I thought this place was supposed to be about a much more civilised attitude towards the incarceration of prisoners of war.
Well, that was the plan originally. It was all very high-minded. The prisoners were going to come here and they were going to improve. You know, there was going to be a lot of good behaviour. But of course, within a couple of years, reality kicks in and it becomes an incredibly violent place here, and they have to punish those prisoners who cause trouble.
What kind of violence?
Well, there's a lot of fighting in between the prisoners themselves, but then what's more worrying is that they start to attack the officers. So you get people throwing stones at the officials, you get them stabbing them. And in one terrible incident in 1808, they do a trawl of all the cells and they turn up 700 daggers that the prisoners have managed to stash away.
It's a really sad story, isn't it? This place starts off as the enlightened ideal of how you process prisoners of war, and within 2 years, it's horrible.
Originally, this was kind of the future, you know, this was the Enlightenment in practice, and then in reality, it becomes an absolute hellhole.
With the end of day rapidly approaching, I thought we were finally getting a handle on this site. But over in the small French cemetery, John has just dropped a geophys bombshell.
As far as anomalies go, these are some of the best anomalies I've seen that could be graves. What we've got are sort of what I'd term long trench-like anomalies, and then smaller individual responses. They may not be graves, but I think we ought to investigate them.
So you're thinking that maybe the trench ones might be multiple burials?
I understand that the one practice was to dig a trench and put, as you say, several bodies in.
As people died?
Yeah.
This isn't what we expected. Hints of large-scale unrecorded burials in a cemetery where we only expected 30 or so graves.
60 metres, that's a long trench.
It is, isn't it? But we won't necessarily have to do all of it, will we? Because if we find a lot of bodies straight away, then we will have answered our question.
Stop.
Yeah.
So, are we actually looking at 2 massive cemeteries here?
Then we keep going. Carry on.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it.
Beyond that gantry is the site of Britain's first ever prisoner of war camp. But I'm in this field because over there, Helen and Stuart think they found a Napoleonic cemetery containing up to 1,700 bodies. But this is our final day. So we've only got one chance at this. And our final trench is going in 1/4 of a mile away from the rest of the site. Helen and Stuart have plumped for this location after studying all the available archives. Although most historical references about the large cemetery actually come from 2 histories written almost 100 years after the prison camp closed down.
But Walker says that agricultural labourers have occasionally found bones in this field, and he's writing in 1915, so that must be something like ditching.
In a way, Helen and Stuart are digging blind here. We've got no geophysics results because this field is full of crops. Over at the main Norman Cross POW camp, it's a different story, where we've been investigating the so-called small French graveyard. Here, the geophys results show it could stretch much further than we expected.
Look, we've got one in here, particularly clearly. Runs along there, right the way round, and back down the other side. North-south, just like you've got them over there.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we've got another one, which is over here. Now, you see, again, this edge here is pretty much bang on line with the edge of that one over there.
Yeah.
So it begins to look as though we might actually have some deliberate laying out of graves, if that's what they are.
Finding a missing Napoleonic War cemetery would be of international importance.
You've opened the debate here.
And the honorary French consul has come along to the site, as any new information we uncover about the cemetery will be passed on to the French War Graves Commission.
Do you feel an attachment to your fellow countrymen who are probably lying in this field or in fields over there?
Well, very much so. Yeah. Very much so. I have discovered a lot in the last 10 years. I've been researching, I've been very interested, and I came all the way here to be part of this event today.
I think it's only right we try and do justice to the men who are buried somewhere in these Cambridgeshire fields.
They do look like grave cuts at the moment,
It's the fact
don't
that
they?
we've got more than one.
Yeah.
That's, I think, our best candidate.
But it's so far proved surprisingly difficult. Even though the prison didn't close until 1814, which on the time team scale of things is like yesterday. And it does beg just one simple question. How do you lose a cemetery containing 1,700 bodies?
It's completely perverse because we've got 700 volumes of written documents about this place. I mean, the Admiralty wrote everything down, and yet so far we cannot find a single mention of the location of the burials.
I'm not surprised, because if you think about the battlefield of Waterloo, thousands of British soldiers died, and yet there's no monument to any of them. Peninsular War, all that whole campaign, not one monument to a private soldier. Private soldiers, you put them in the ground, you walk away. You might put a monument up to an officer, but private, nothing.
There's an interesting one here, died by a visitation of God.
Yes, I think that usually means they don't quite know what it was.
But even if the cemetery wasn't documented because these were mere foot soldiers, it seems the Navy went to extraordinary lengths to record the causes of death.
Notes is there seems to be an awful lot of people who've died of basically lung problems, lung diseases,
That's
lung
right,
infections.
yes.
So
yes, with the massive humanity sitting in all the prison barracks here, epidemic disease would have spread very, very quickly amongst them. So respiratory infections were common, consumption or tuberculosis was very common amongst these prisoners.
There's something odd going on here, but we're determined to do our best to find this cemetery, including the normally non-digging Stuart, who's willingly volunteered for trench duty.
I did have a doctor's note to prevent me digging here.
Unfortunately, some of the potential graves spotted earlier in the day are so slight, they seem to disappear with the scrape of a trowel.
It's all soft gravel, isn't it?
And yet, up at the small French graveyard, the archaeology is as clear as day. What strikes me about this more than anything else is how shallow it is. It's only, what, about 3 foot down?
Yeah, half a modern depth. Yeah.
Compared with the depth that Helen and Stuart are digging, looking for the big cemetery over there. And they still haven't found any bodies. What does that say?
Well, it tells me but there probably weren't any bodies there because the preservation, you see the condition of those bones, well, preservation conditions where they're digging are just as good.
In which case, we've still lost this third flipping cemetery.
Yes.
How do you lose a cemetery that big?
With the greatest possible difficulty. You've got to bear in mind that the farmers around here have been farming this land. These fields are literally hundreds of years old. Now, if somebody turned up and buried 1,700 bodies in one of their fields, that would pass into family history and it would stay in family history. And as it was only a mere 200 years ago, I mean, it's quite inconceivable that people would have forgotten about it.
But if the big cemetery isn't in Helen and Stuart's field, then we've only got a matter of hours to find its true location. Thankfully, our trenches in the camp itself have delivered the goods.
Right, so I'm in the black hole.
And we can now finish our investigation into the architecture of internment.
The historical documents suggest that it's 5 metres wide and approximately 10 metres long. And, I mean, you can see this is approximately 5 metres. It's spot on.
So it's quite a big old building, isn't it?
It's a substantial size, yeah. And we have 2 pieces of ironwork.
Oh, yes.
You can imagine that on a heavy timber door.
That's a heavy old latch, isn't it?
Yeah, and then we also have...
Whoa! Oh, look at that. It's a hasp for a padlock.
But you just imagine being shut away in here, out of the light, and not being able to earn a living or anything.
You just hear the clank of the door shutting, can't you?
It must have been quite grim.
Having located the black hole, we can now complete our layout for the camp. And we've built up a picture of a well-designed space capable of dealing with thousands of enemy combatants. But although its design was revolutionary, a new way to keep men safe and healthy away from the field of battle, the neat rows of barrack blocks and latrines still harboured the crime, diseases and death that had always accompanied the incarcerated. And yet the small finds suggest that some of the prisoners made the best of the years they were interned here.
This is tableware, isn't it? It's sort of fine glazed earthenware, the sort of thing you'd find on a rich farmer's table or someone who lived in the city. It's incredible, really. I mean, even wine bottles. I mean, can we really imagine that they had wine here? And I mean, we know they had a tobacco ration, so here we are with bits of clay pipe and so forth. But obviously, you know, some quite high living.
Well, we do have this great letter from one of the Brits who's absolutely furious because he says, look, some of these prisoners are taking 100 guineas out away from the camp with them. It's driving him mad.
Yeah, richer than the guards. How galling would that be if you had to stand watch over these people, they're swanning around with their wine bottles, smoking tobacco, spending money on all this sort of finery, you know.
But in spite of this wealth of small detail, almost nothing now remains of the structures that made up the world's first prisoner of war camp. In the end, we beat the French, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
So what happened to the prisoner of war camp?
They sell it off. It's auctioned and everything goes.
They clear the site pretty quickly, don't they, actually? And they sell all the wooden structures some of them end up as cottages in Peterborough and stuff.
And what happened to the prisoners?
They organise merchant ships to get them away. They march them out of the camp. And for the people that do go home, they're going back to a world that's completely different. They've been fighting for a revolutionary cause. They've been fighting with Napoleon. He's gone. There's now a monarchy back, which is something they didn't want to start with. When they go home, I wonder if the families remembered them, let alone anybody else.
And actually, they didn't all leave, because there's one Italian called Petrono Lambertini, and he's too ill to move. So he's just left in the camp to die. Everybody else has gone, and he never even gets his freedom.
We now have just one task left, to find the cemetery for those prisoners who never made it back home.
I borrow the shovel. I borrowed it and haven't done anything with it yet.
And we're now pretty confident they weren't buried anywhere near the trench that Stuart and Helen have been so passionately digging.
It's absolutely typical of Ice Age, ice action in the gravels. You get them all over these Neen gravels. Yeah, I wouldn't waste any more time on it. It's natural. If you're very lucky, you might get a mammoth tusk out of it.
So nothing in the field where we expected to find hundreds of burials.
See, that's interesting because there's actually quite a depth of soil underneath those legs, isn't it? Yeah. You just see if there's another set of legs in underneath here.
But back on the main site, the small French graveyard doesn't seem so small anymore.
They look like they may have been coffined. There's nails coming up in odd places. They're only small nails, so they're not sort of very fancy coffins, but I think they've been coffined. I mean, we know at the time, sometimes there were up to 8 people a day dying. Yeah. So rather than digging individual graves, you'd have something that was open, you'd put a layer of individuals in there. You might put a sprinkling of soil over them just to cover the bases of them up, but then you'd leave it open because you know you're going to have to dig another one the next day.
Yeah. This is now turning into something that's, you know, much bigger than a small cemetery used for a limited number of years, isn't it?
This is a major cemetery. I'm sure that underneath this pasture there are a lot of people buried.
These multiple burials were the last thing we expected here, and more intriguingly, they correspond to white blobs on John's geophys. And there are a lot of white blobs.
You can actually see that our 2 graves are on a straight alignment going through there. So if we take that as a regular spacings, just think how many of these white blobs you could actually create into possible graves. Look,
there could be 15 or 20 of them, couldn't
there? There could be literally tens or if not hundreds of them. I mean, this geophysics plot is only this end of the field. It could go right the way out there. There could be literally hundreds. And if you've got hundreds of graves, you can have literally thousands of burials.
So have we been unwittingly digging the missing mass cemetery for the last 2 days? Well, Helen and Stuart can't quite believe that they've been on a wild goose chase.
There's a lot of evidence pointing towards it being there. I think there's still the possibility it's in that field that we looked at.
Bethany, it's tantalising, isn't it? Because the documents say the powers that be bought a field and 1,700 bodies went into it.
He is writing 100 years after the event, of course, but he's very careful. I mean, you know, he really deals with his sources well. I tell you what troubles me more is that the local papers are very interested in this camp and they write a lot about it. They're very interested in the grisly detail in particular, and there is nothing about the burial of a huge number of prisoners over there, and that seems suspicious to me.
But we find it really hard to believe, over this side of the disco bonnet, we find it really hard to believe that a whole community 100 years later could be convinced that it was in that field if it wasn't.
What's your feeling, Francis?
An authority writing 100 years after the events, I think, has led us a bit astray. I think the archaeological evidence points overwhelmingly in favour of this field. I'm personally quite convinced that this field where we're standing has got 1,700 plus burials in it.
We now believe the field Helen and Stuart investigated was purchased as a potential cemetery, but for whatever reason, it was never used. Instead, this large patch of unassuming ground to the east of Norman Cross Camp became a vast burial ground for almost 2,000 Napoleonic POWs. If ever proof was needed that you can't always believe what's in the history books, then this fantastic dig has provided it.
No one had dug here before to test all those documentary references, to test the accuracy of the maps, to test all the hearsay and rumours. So the great thing is we've come out here and let the site speak for itself. We've let the archaeology tell the story.
You know what I find really ironic? Is that you and the other Friends of Norman Cross recited the monument, the Eagle Monument, a few years ago. And totally inadvertently, you actually placed it much closer to the place where so many of the prisoners of war were actually buried. And as we're not lifting any bodies, it will rightly remain their final resting place. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses, and behind-the-scenes insights.